Hello, I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer, and today as part of my B-Tier guides, I'll take you through my beginner-friendly character creation guide for The Elder Scrolls Morrowind. Morrowind is infamous for its unintuitive combat that is based on attack rolls that tend to cause this to happen. What's more, you don't get proper visual and audio feedback whenever you miss, so it's completely understandable that a lot of people get frustrated when they try to play Morrowind and end up feeling super weak in combat due to a low hit chance. But the thing is, Morrowind isn't actually that difficult. The game just doesn't explain how these things work other than through some too long text boxes that no one reads. So I'm going to take you through what you need to know to be able to create characters that you'll have a good combat experience with in Morrowind. I'm not giving you a specific build because I think that's boring and doesn't teach you anything. Instead, I'm giving you the tools to create your own builds by explaining how things work and offering some guidelines. But don't worry, if you still feel intimidated by character creation after I've explained all of this stuff, I have a short list of pre-made classes that are beginner-friendly towards the end of the video. Before we get into the guide, I'd like to take a moment to say a special thank you to my members. I appreciate all of you so much. Joining as a member would help the channel a lot, but of course, only if you want to and can afford it. I am always thankful even if you just like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment. Back to the guide. First, let's demystify the Morrowind attack problem. How do you hit enemies? It's simple. You have three things to focus on. 1. Your skill in the weapon you're attacking with. 2. Your agility attribute. And 3. Your current fatigue aka stamina compared to the full bar. Your equipped weapon skill plus your agility have the most contributions to your chance to hit an enemy. Your fatigue bar is also surprisingly important. A full fatigue bar makes you 25% more likely to hit, while an empty one results in a 25% decrease to your hit chance. So before a fight, do try to rest or at least walk instead of run to recover your fatigue. Even with a high weapon skill and high agility, that 25% reduction from low fatigue can feel annoying and cause you to lose fights because of missing too many attacks. The most important things to focus on during character creation for the purpose of being effective in combat are attributes and weapon skills. Your starting attributes and skill levels will very much dictate what you can and can't do well in the early game. Later on, you'll be able to train your skills at various trainer NPCs once you have enough money to pay them for their service. And of course, you'll also level up your weapon skills just by playing the game and using those weapons in combat. Your attributes can be increased only when you gain a character level, and the amount of points you can put into an attribute is related to which skills you increased before your character leveled up. But I'll explain that later. A more experienced player can do all sorts of challenge playthroughs using weird skill choices and restrictions. But as a beginner, the best thing you can do is have relatively high starting skill levels for the types of actions you want to use often. Otherwise, you'll struggle even with low-level stuff so much that it may be too frustrating and you could end up quitting. And I'm assuming since you're watching this that you don't want to quit, you want to keep playing so you can get to experience the cool aspects of Morrowind. The first part of your character's class is the specialization. You have 3 choices: magic, combat, and stealth. Your choice adds a +5 to all the skills that match the specialization, plus those skills will level up faster, needing only 80% of the normal XP needed to level up. Combat has armor, athletics, axe, block, blunt weapon, heavy armor, long blade, medium armor, and spear. Stealth has acrobatics, hand-to-hand, light armor, marksman, mercantile, security, short blade, sneak, and speechcraft. And magic has alchemy, alteration, conjuration, destruction, enchant, illusion, restoration, and unarmored. Generally speaking, the specialization you want to choose includes most of the skills that your character will be using, or in other words, it should match your character's build type. If you're going to be mainly a fighter using melee weapons and heavier armors, then combat is the way to go. If you're a mage mostly using spells, then magic is what you want. And if you're a rogue mainly using lighter weapons, sneaking around and lockpicking, haggling with merchants and so on, then stealth is the specialization for you. Obviously, this isn't the most impactful choice you can make for your character's class since +5 isn't a huge bonus, and while the faster leveling is nice, it's not necessary because your major skills will also get an XP bonus. Don't sweat the specialization, go choose your major and minor skills first based on what you'd like your character to do, and then choose the specialization that your chosen skills lean towards. Speaking of skills, these are the most important for the purpose of making Morrowind easier to play for beginners. Each character class has 5 major skills, 5 minor skills, and all the other skills are considered miscellaneous. Every time you increase any combination of major and minor skills a total of 10 times, your character can level up by resting. Every kind of major or minor skill increase counts, whether it's from using those skills naturally as you play, buying some levels at trainer NPCs, or even reading certain books that increase a skill. Miscellaneous skills don't count towards leveling up, but they do count towards the points you can add to your attributes during a character level up. The 5 skills you tag as major will start with plus 25 points. The skills you tag as minor will start with plus 10 points. Ideally, the major skills you choose are the most important for your playstyle, especially in combat, and the minor ones can be more defensive or utility focused. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to recommend which types of skills you should tag as major and minor based on their usefulness. But of course, you should choose the skills you want to use often so that you can level them up naturally just by playing the game. Starting with combat skills. The most important major skill to tag 90% of the time is a weapon skill. By starting 25 points higher, you can ensure your character can hit enemies more consistently with that weapon type. If you want to get an even higher starting level for it, you can check what weapon skill your chosen race has the highest bonus to, and choose that one as your first major skill. For example, Red Guards have plus 15 to Long Blades, so you can choose Long Blade as a major skill for a Red Guard character. Wood Elves have plus 15 to Marksman, so you could be a great archer as a Wood Elf. And Dark Elves have plus 10 to Short Blades, so they're great at using daggers and short swords. You can of course tag more than one weapon skill, and in fact, I do recommend you pick a secondary weapon if you're more of a martial character, aka fighting with weapons most of the time. This can be either a major or minor skill. The important thing is to have a decent starting level in a secondary weapon because there are a lot of cool enchanted weapons in Morrowind, and it's nice to be able to use more of them. Plus, it's good to have variety and both a melee and ranged damaging option if you can, either a melee weapon plus marksman for ranged, or 1 or 2 melee weapons plus destruction magic for ranged spells. If you want to know my personal recommendations for weapon skills, my favorites are Spear and Short Blade. Spear is powerful due to its longer range, which means especially if you manage to walk backwards while fighting an enemy, you may be able to keep them from attacking you while you're still able to thrust at them with your spear. Short Blade has a much shorter range, but you can attack much faster, and that means that if you have enchanted short blades with various effects happening when you strike, you'll activate those effects more often and possibly kill an enemy faster due to the high attack speed. And I will also mention Long Blade as a good option because there's a lot of good enchanted long blades in the game, plus both Red Guards and Imperials have good starting bonuses in this skill. And finally, Marksman is a good option if you're not planning on using destruction magic for ranged damage. By the way, a super important piece of advice when it comes to weapons is this. In the game settings, in the gameplay section, you have an option that says always use best attack for equipped weapon. Make sure that option is checked, because it will ensure your character is always using the best type of attack with the weapon you have equipped. I play the game only with that option enabled, and frankly have no idea how the different attacks work otherwise, so yeah, absolutely make sure it's enabled. If you want to be super focused on magic, I don't recommend playing a pure mage as a beginner. It's great to have 1 or 2 or even 3 magic schools tagged as major or minor skills if you're interested in playing with magic, but first and foremost, you should have a weapon. This is because you'll likely run out of magicka, aka mana, often during fights, and you may not be able to restore it all the time. Maybe you run out of potions. And another reason you may not want to cast spells at your enemies is if they have a high chance to resist or reflect your spells back at you. However, the one magic school I pretty much always have tagged for my characters is Restoration. This mostly has to do with healing yourself, curing yourself of various afflictions, restoring or fortifying your attributes, because they can be damaged by certain enemies, and so on. You can get very nice restoration spells just from spell merchants, so you don't even need to worry about the spell-making system if you don't want to. If you choose restoration as a major skill and have a pretty good starting willpower, you may even have the Hearth Heal spell as a starting one for your character. It's a great spell even in the later parts of the game, but even if you don't get this as a starting spell, literally the first merchant you come across in the starting town of Sedanin, Ariel at Ariel's Trade House, sells this spell. Anyway, don't sleep on restoration. It's a great magic school even if to just help you not have to carry so many restore health potions with you. If you want to use some magic offensively, then destruction is what you need. It offers damaging spells of all elements, plus they can either be on touch or at range. It's best to have a spell or two of each element because some enemies can be highly resistant or even immune to certain elements. For example, Flame Atronachs are immune to fire, but have a weakness to frost, so it would be great to have a frost spell against them. If your destruction and willpower are decently high when you start the game, you may get Firebite as a starting spell, which does fire damage on touch, a very nice spell to deal with early enemies. But even if you don't get it, the merchant in the starter town of Sedanin, Ariel from Ariel's Trade House, has a few destruction spells you can buy from him. Fireball, a ranged fire spell, Frostbite, a touch frost spell, and Spark, a ranged shock spell. So you can get a nice combination right from the get-go once you manage to get a bit of gold. Afterwards, you can most easily find destruction spells in the mage guilds in various towns, and priests and temples tend to have good restoration spells. Technically, Conjuration is also a good spell school in combat because it allows you to summon creatures to fight for you, or even conjure good weapons and armor for yourself. However, it's more difficult to use for beginners, so I don't recommend it for your first playthrough. Finally, for combat skills, I recommend one armor skill for the type of armor you want your character to wear: light, medium, heavy, or unarmored. This increases your armor score while you're wearing armor of that type, or in the case of unarmored when you aren't wearing any armor. Keep in mind that you should try to stick to only one armor because mixing and matching pieces of different types will slow down your skill progression and reduce your overall armor score. Your armor skill can be a minor skill in my opinion, since you will be leveling up a lot just because you'll take plenty of damage to gain XP in this skill. So while I do think it's crucial to have an armor skill tagged for damage reduction and to be able to level it up faster, you can get away with it as a minor skill. One optional combat-related skill to get as a minor skill would be block. This makes you more likely to successfully block a melee attack while having a shield equipped. The reason this is optional is because maybe you want to use a two-handed weapon or your fists, though I don't recommend hand-to-hand for beginners, and in that case you won't be using your shield unless your weapon is sheathed. Only melee attacks can be blocked, and only from an attack coming from in front of your character. Blocking in Morrowind is automatic, so it's not like you can manually put your shield up, so this is kind of like having an extra source of dodge chance for melee attacks specifically. The block chance is capped between 10% and 50%, so it's not amazing. I figured I'd mention it though because if you only plan on using one-handed weapons, then you might as well equip a shield in your offhand, since you otherwise can't equip anything else in the offhand. So to summarize, these are the combat-related skills you need. At least one weapon skill, though 2 or 3 is better, one armor skill, and if you like using magic, then destruction and restoration are the most easy to use in fights. Optionally, you can pick a block as a minor skill if you plan on only using one-handed weapons for a chance to avoid melee attacks. Now let's talk about the utility skills. These are the skills that help you out mainly in exploration, in interactions with NPCs, and some can be related to combat as well. The Armorer skill will make you better at repairing your weapons and armor with the use of consumable repair tools and also make your gear degrade slower. Unless you're going for a fully unarmored and unweaponed build, aka only using magic or magic in hand-to-hand, then repairing your gear is crucial, since the lower its durability gets, the less effective the item is. You can repair your items at blacksmiths who provide repair services, but unless your armorer skill is very low, buying and using repair tools is cheaper than paying for NPC repairs. Plus, you could find yourself far from a town while you're questing or exploring, so it's always good to have a few emergency repair tools with you. I don't recommend this one as a major skill, but it is very useful to have it slightly higher by choosing it as a minor skill, in particular when you're playing a more weapon and armor focused character. As a bonus tip related to repairing items, all Fighters Guild equipment chests have restocking supplies of armorer's hammers, So if you join the guild, you'll be able to have free repair tools from these chests. Security is pretty much a must-have since it makes you able to pick higher level locks when you use a lockpick. Technically, you could also choose to specialize in the Alteration School of Magic instead, since that also allows you to open locks with open spells instead of lockpicks, but magic is a bit more complicated, and while Alteration can let you do fun stuff like breathe underwater, levitate, jump farther, and so on, I would still choose Security as a skill even if I had Alteration. It takes longer to have the money to buy lock opening spells and be able to cast them successfully, not to mention that you need to find the spell merchant who sells that spell to begin with. Alteration is a nice option to have though, perhaps in addition to Security as a minor skill, because it has such varied spell effects. Levitation in particular will come in handy in Exploration and is even necessary in some areas. If you don't have a Levitate spell, you'd need an enchanted item with the effect or Levitation potions. The potions are pretty easy to come by, usually called Rising Force potions, but having the ability to cast Levitate at will is nice because it's not just useful to explore areas that are hard to reach, but you could also levitate in combat to either get away from an enemy or kite them in a more vertical way. While you may be used to sneaking around and stealing people's stuff in other games, I don't recommend tagging sneak. You don't have an eye icon to let you know whether an enemy or NPC sees you while you're sneaking, and in some cases, even if an NPC seems to be looking away, they might still see you steal something and either report your crime or start attacking you. The best thing is to steal from unguarded places and then be careful not to sell any types of items you stole to a merchant if you stole that item type from them. The thing is that even without having the sneak skill tagged, you can still easily steal from unguarded places or areas where you can break the line of sight of an NPC, like for example the lighthouse in Sedanin, where you can sneak while standing behind this pillar, and the lighthouse keeper won't notice that you're stealing a bunch of her stuff. Alchemy is another nice utility skill because it makes you better at crafting potions, especially in terms of having a higher chance to successfully craft them. Of course, this is only useful if you're actually planning to craft potions, otherwise it would be a waste. You need alchemical tools to craft potions: a mortar and pestle, an alembic, a calcinator, and a retort. You need at the very least a mortar and pestle to create a potion, and the quality of the mortar and pestle affects the quality of the potion you produce. The alembic reduces the strength and duration of negative effects. The calcinator increases the strength and duration of both positive and negative effects, and the retort increases the strength of all positive effects. Keep in mind you can only create potions that affect your character, so there isn't any reason to create potions with only negative effects, other than to level up your alchemy, I guess. And I recommend staying away from negative effects on potions in general. To craft a potion, you will need a minimum of 2 ingredients that share at least one effect, and you can use up to 4 ingredients in a potion. I'm not going to bore you with extra details other than to tell you the easiest and best potions to make for yourself are Restore Health and Fatigue potions. For Restore Health potions, use Marshmallow and Salt Rice. They're super easy to find and cheap to buy. For Restore Fatigue, Scuttle and Scrib Jerky is a good combo because of the same reason. Finally, if you want to get a bit spicy and create a potion that restores both your health and fatigue, you can combine Marshmallow, Salt Rice, and Kwama eggs, all common and cheap ingredients. Speechcraft is a decent minor skill because it increases the disposition of all NPCs towards you, making them more likely to answer your questions and be persuaded by you in dialogue. There are quite a few quests in Morrowind that make it easier for you to get what you need if an NPC likes you, so I would even go as far as to say to choose this as one of your major skills if you'd like to be able to solve some situations without having to resort to bribery or murder. Bribing characters in the persuasion menu increases their disposition, but you may also have options during a specific line of questioning to pay someone off. 2 separate things, both still bribery. Of course, if you're not into solving things peacefully, you can just skip this skill, though you will have to pay off a bunch of NPCs and quests as a result, so keep that in mind. Mercantile is a nice bonus minor skill if you don't have anything else you need, because it will allow you to haggle for better prices from earlier on, but with how easily you can find expensive loot in Morrowind through exploration or stealing, it's not necessary to haggle. Athletics and acrobatics are skills that relate to your movement in the world. Athletics increases your running and swimming speed. Acrobatics increases your ability to jump, both in distance and height, as well as allowing you to fall from greater heights without dying, aka reducing fall damage. Generally, I tag these as minor skills or not at all because it's super easy to increase them just by playing the game. You increase athletics by running or swimming, and acrobatics by jumping and taking fall damage. You'll do this a lot just by exploring the map. I tend to tag acrobatics as a minor skill but not athletics. This is because acrobatics is governed by strength and will allow you to increase your strength attribute when you level up, whereas athletics is governed by speed. Strength is much more important to increase because it increases your damage with weapons, your fatigue, and your carrying capacity, plus your chance to repair items. Speed just increases the speed with which you move and the distance of your jumps. Anyway, this is the perfect place to talk about attributes because they are the second most important element of your character. Your choices of major and minor skills will determine how much you can increase your attributes whenever you gain a character level, so it's important to understand what the different attributes do and which ones you care about most depending on the type of build you're going for: warrior, mage, rogue, or a hybrid. Whenever you gain a character level, you can rest and a screen will show up where you can increase your attributes. The way you improve the number of points you can increase an attribute by are by leveling up skills that are governed by that specific attribute. Only major and minor skills count towards your character level, but all skills, including the miscellaneous ones, can contribute towards increasing an attribute by more points. The maximum number of points you can increase an attribute by each level is 5, other than luck, which is capped at only 1 point per character level. You need to increase skills under a specific attribute 10 or more times to get the maximum plus 5. I myself am not a min-maxer, so I frankly don't care at all about reaching the plus 5 bonus for my preferred attributes. In my opinion, getting a plus 2 or plus 3 for the most useful attributes each time you level up is more than fine and very easily attainable. Since each main attribute other than luck governs certain skills, the easiest way to ensure you're getting some bonuses towards the attributes you want is by having skills governed by them tagged as major or minor. You'll be using your major and minor skills the most, which means that as long as you have something there for the attributes you want to increase, you don't have to think about this aspect and just play the game however feels natural for you. Generally, these are the attributes I recommend focusing on for the different build types. If you're mainly a fighter, the most important attributes are strength, agility, and endurance. Endurance would be the most important early on, since every time you gain a character level, your maximum health increases automatically by 10% of your endurance, so it's best to increase your endurance from the beginning if you're a fighter. Endurance also increases your maximum fatigue and determines how quickly your fatigue regenerates. Strength will mainly increase your damage and fatigue. Agility will increase your chance to hit with weapons and your fatigue, plus your ability to use sneak, security, and block, and your resistance against getting knocked down. If at a later point you feel like these 3 attributes are at a good level, willpower is good to improve because it increases your maximum fatigue, your ability to resist paralyze and silence magic, and it also affects your ability to cast spells of any school. If you're playing more of a hybrid build and plan on using magic a fair bit, then willpower becomes one of the main attributes to increase. For a mage build, the most important attributes are willpower, intelligence, and then less important are endurance and agility. Willpower is the most important because it increases your chance to cast spells of any school. Intelligence is in second place because it determines your base amount of magicka, aka mana. Endurance is of course useful to increase your health pool because even if you try to stay away from enemies, they will still hit you. And finally, agility is still useful for the purpose of increasing your fatigue and resist getting knocked down. It also increases your chance to hit with weapons, and even as a mage, it's good to have a weapon as a backup plan. For rogue builds, the most important attributes are agility, strength, and possibly willpower if you're planning on using magic, and possibly personality if you want to be able to bargain with merchants more easily. Endurance is of course always nice to put at least some points into in the early game to have extra health, but you may be fine with a squishier but more powerful character, so endurance isn't all that necessary. You'll notice I didn't recommend 2 particular attributes at all: speed and luck. I didn't recommend speed because it just affects how fast you move, including swimming. It does also increase the distance covered when jumping forward, so if you have a high speed value, you could jump over wide gaps without using a magical effect, but that's pretty much the only really useful thing speed does. And that is only in the case of a character who isn't using any magical effects at all, not even from potions. It would be very easy to get Rising Force, aka levitation potions, and scrolls or enchanted items with traversal or teleportation effects. While Morrowind doesn't have standard means of fast travel, you still have Silt Striders, boats, the Mages Guild's teleportation from guild to guild, plus teleportation spells. And you have spells like Levitate, Jump, Swift Swim, or Water Walking, which can also make you move easier or faster in the world. So while speed isn't useless, it's also not really an important attribute to increase most of the time. I'm sure veteran players of Morrowind may disagree, but this is a beginner-focused guide, and so I'm focusing on the attributes that beginners will get the most value out of. Luck is an interesting attribute because you can only increase it by 1 point when you gain a character level, since it doesn't govern any skills at all. Luck affects the chance of success of everything that involves a chance: hitting and avoiding attacks, casting spells, lockpicking, and alchemy. It also plays a small role in determining your starting spells, alongside having a high starting magic skill and willpower. Luck is more important for mages than anyone else, due to increasing the chance of casting spells successfully, and while other chance-based actions have finite target numbers, spellcasting has an effectively infinite target height, but only if you craft super high power spells. But with spells you can buy from vendors, you shouldn't have any trouble as long as your spell school skill is high, together with your willpower. So because it's hard to increase your luck, and it doesn't have strong effects with such small increases, I don't recommend focusing on increasing it unless you're an experienced player and you know what you're doing. I certainly am not a veteran Morrowind player by any means, despite having played the game for over 10 years, and I personally wouldn't spend one of my attribute increases on luck. Anyway, now that I've explained which attributes are important for different builds, here are the skills they govern. Strength governs acrobatics, armorer, axe, blunt weapon, and long blade. For a warrior who uses any of these weapon types, it's super easy to increase it. For a mage or rogue, it may be more difficult, so I recommend tagging acrobatics as a major or minor skill so that you level it up faster and get more points towards strength if you want to increase it. Agility governs block, light armor, marksman, and sneak. It's easiest to increase if you're a rogue, since light armor is likely your armor skill of choice, and you may be using marksman as your main or secondary weapon skill. Block is a potential skill to include as a major or minor one for warriors who want to use medium or heavy armor, so that you can level up block more often and get some points towards agility. Not really sure how easily sneak levels up, since I never use it in combat and only use it sometimes for the purpose of stealing, so no idea how good it is for increasing your agility. Endurance governs heavy armor, medium armor, and spear. This is by far the hardest attribute to get extra points for mages and rogues, because you very likely won't be using medium or heavy armor, and it's unlikely you'll use spear as your weapon of choice unless you like it for its extra reach. Spear is certainly the best choice of skill to tag for mages and rogues if you want to increase your endurance, but the lack of endurance-governed skills is the main reason I mention endurance as only optional for these builds. Intelligence governs alchemy, conjuration, enchant, and security. You only care about leveling intelligence up for the extra magicka, so mages or hybrid builds using magic are interested in this. Alchemy is the easiest skill to recommend, since you can easily craft simple potions to either use or sell, which will level up your alchemy and thus get you extra points for intelligence. Security is of course a great exploration skill that pretty much everyone should have, but it's harder to level up since you don't always know how many locked doors and containers you'll find before your next level up, so that's why alchemy is the better pick. Willpower governs alteration, destruction, mysticism, and restoration. Restoration is the magic skill I recommend for everyone, since it helps you heal yourself, cure yourself and others of various afflictions, and restore your attributes if an enemy damages them. Destruction is a good pick as a damage source and to increase your willpower. While willpower is first and foremost important for mages due to increasing your chance to successfully cast spells, it's obviously useful for any character using magic, even just a little bit, as well as characters not using magic for the extra fatigue and stuff. For mages, of course, alteration and mysticism are also nice to have, but restoration and destruction are likely going to be used and thus leveled up more often. Speed governs athletics, hand-to-hand, short blade, and unarmored. This is the easiest skill by far to increase because athletics will level up automatically if you run and swim around, which you'll do most of the time unless you specifically choose to walk everywhere and use other ways to move around faster, like jump spells and the like. You'll very likely level your unarmored skill by accident, at least in the beginning as well, even if you have another armor type tagged, because you may be missing a certain piece of armor, like for example a shield, a pauldron, greaves, or a helmet. So unarmored will also contribute towards speed. Finally, short blade is just a very good weapon type, so you may have it as a major or minor skill on your character, in which case that will also increase your potential to gain speed when your character levels up. So because of this, even if you do care about increasing your speed, you really don't have to worry about it because it will have a good bonus whether you want it or not. Personality governs illusion, mercantile, and speechcraft. Well, it's a potentially useful attribute to increase for rogue-type characters or characters who want to be able to more easily persuade and bribe NPCs. It's not that amazing of an attribute to increase. Finally, luck, as I said, doesn't govern any skills and can thus only be increased by 1 point every time you level up. There is one easy way you can increase your attributes, and that is at character creation, where you have to choose 2 favored attributes for your character's class. These will be automatically chosen if you choose a pre-made class, but you can choose them for yourself if you're making your own class. Each favorite attribute gets +10, which is great. The best 3 attributes to choose from are endurance, agility, and willpower. For a fighter or rogue, I'd choose endurance and agility, or alternatively agility and strength if I don't care as much about the extra health per level up, since strength at level 1 also increases your starting health plus your damage with weapons. For a mage, I'd choose willpower and intelligence, extra magicka and fatigue, and increased chance to cast spells. For a hybrid build using both magic and regular weapon combat, I'd go for agility and willpower, extra fatigue and increased chance to hit and cast spells. That's pretty much it. The favorite attributes thing is fairly straightforward. You just choose the attributes that have the most powerful impact on what you're going to be doing the most. So this is everything that goes into a character class. You can use this information to create your own class, which I recommend because you have total control over which skills are tagged, and because of this, you won't get any useless ones. But if you feel like it's still a bit too much, too overwhelming to create your own class, you can at least use my advice to inform which pre-made class to choose from. There are 21 pre-made classes, and I made a video in which I recommend the best ones based on your preferred playstyle. If you're interested in hearing more details about the pros and cons of each good pre-made class, you can watch that video. I'll be brief here since this is already a long enough guide. For fighters, I recommend the Warrior and Crusader classes. The Warrior class is a pure combat class without any magic skills. The Crusader is mostly focused on combat skills, but it does also have Destruction, Restoration, and Alchemy. The Knight is another decent pick similar to the Crusader, but it only has Restoration as a spell school and has fewer good skills, and the favorite attributes are also worse. For rogues, I recommend the Thief and the Bard. The Thief is a pure class mainly focused on stealth. The Bard also uses Alchemy and the Illusion spell school to augment stealthy gameplay, but there is a rogue hybrid class that I like even more than the Bard, which is the Nightblade. This one focuses mainly on stealth skills, but also has Destruction, Alteration, Illusion, and Mysticism, which are potentially very useful for a magical thief. For mages, I recommend the Mage and the Healer. The Mage is a pure magical class focused on all the spell schools, unarmored, and it has Short Blade as a backup weapon. The Healer is a more interesting class focused on the more utility spell schools, hand-to-hand, blunt, and either light armor or unarmored. It's giving a cleric vibe that's interesting, though not as great in Morrowind as it would be in later Elder Scrolls games where you can have followers to buff and heal. Finally, for hybrid builds, I recommend the Battle Mage, the Spell Sword, the Nightblade, as I previously mentioned in the Rogue category, and potentially the Witch Hunter, though that's a bit of a weird class. The Battle Mage and Spell Sword are in the same vein, focused on martial combat and magic. The Nightblade is a combo of stealth and magic, and the Witch Hunter is a combination of all three, though I'm unsure just how successful it is at balancing all 3 playstyles in the long run. If you want to play a truly hybrid class, I really recommend making your own instead. Other than the classes themselves, you have 2 more choices to make during character creation: your character's race and their birth sign. Your character's race should be up to you because maybe you have a specific aesthetic you're going for. However, I will mention that each race has certain bonuses and potential penalties. Before you lock in your race, do take a moment to mouse over the bonuses and penalties to see what they are. For example, High Elves have bonuses towards all the magic skills. they have a 75% chance to resist common diseases, and their maximum magicka is increased by 150%. However, they have 25% weakness to shock and frost, and 50% weakness to fire and magicka. These are fairly significant penalties and may feel a bit too difficult to deal with for a beginner. So while that increased magicka and bonuses to magic skills may look juicy, I think High Elves are the worst race for beginners due to the elemental and magical weaknesses. One more major negative to keep in mind is that Argonians and Khajiit can't wear boots or shoes and can only wear open helmets. I really like playing characters of these two races, but the equipment restriction may be a bit frustrating for beginners since it means less stats overall, but also less potential to use enchanted items. Personally, I don't find this restriction to be as bad as the High Elf penalties, but it's still something to keep in mind. If you really want race recommendations from me for what's easiest to play, Bretons have literally no penalties, they have 50% more maximum magicka, and they have 50% magic resistance, so they are the strongest race in the game. Wood Elves are the main race I would recommend for a rogue class for beginners due to good bonuses to stealth skills. Nords are super powerful as fighters due to being completely immune to frost, and also having a 50% shock resistance, plus of course having great bonuses to combat skills. Orcs are another great option for warriors because they have great combat skill bonuses and 25% magic resistance. Red Guards are yet another great option for warriors due to combat skill bonuses and 75% poison and disease resistance. In particular, Red Guards have a plus 15 to long blade, so it's great to use that as their main weapon, but you can use any of these three races for a fighter character, they're all good. Finally, Dark Elves have 75% fire resistance and have more varied bonuses to skills, so they are decent for any character archetype, especially a hybrid one. Dark Elves are also the most common NPC race you'll find, so it's easier to interact with NPCs since Dark Elves are racist and dislike the other races. So Dark Elves are my pick for versatility. Finally, let's talk about your character's birth sign. The warrior is good for characters who will attack with weapons a lot because it fortifies your attack by 10. You won't really see this attack fortification effect in game, so if you want to increase your chance to hit more than just through high agility and a high weapon skill, then this is the sign to choose. The mage is a super solid option for mages because it increases your maximum magicka by 50%. Personally, this is always my choice if I play as a mage because while the increased magicka isn't as much as with the Atronach or apprentice signs, it doesn't have any downsides. The Thief is a star sign I don't really choose for my characters, but which can be decent if you're playing as a more evasion-focused character. It grants you 10 points of Sanctuary, which causes you to be more difficult to hit with physical attacks. You can get extra Sanctuary from casting spells on yourself, or from some enchantments on items which allow you to cast yet another Sanctuary effect. But even without extra sources of Sanctuary, this is just a bit of extra evasion, so it's still a good enough bonus. The Serpent grants you a spell that deals poison damage to the target on touch for 30 seconds, but also drains a small amount of your health for 30 seconds. I've personally stayed away from this sign because I don't like to damage my own character if I can help it, so I can't tell you whether this is any good. If you have a super high health pool, or you can heal yourself or otherwise resist the effect, perhaps with magicka resistance, then this would be a better choice. The Lady is my personal favorite sign because it increases your personality and endurance by 25 points each. Endurance is of course great to have at a higher level from as early as possible for extra HP gained every level, and a higher personality attribute means NPCs will have a higher disposition towards you, and you'll find it easier to persuade, bribe, and haggle. If you don't need the extra magicka as a spellcaster, then this is a super solid option. The Lord grants you a 100% weakness to fire, but also grants you the spell Blood of the North, which restores 2 health for the next 30 seconds. Is this spell worth the huge weakness to fire? I don't think so. There's plenty of sources of fire damage like Flame Atronachs and lots of enemy spellcasters, so I wouldn't choose such a weakness. The Steed increases your speed attribute by 25 points. I don't know why you'd choose this because it just increases your movement speed, but at least it doesn't have any downsides, so it's a safe pick. The Apprentice increases your maximum magicka by 150%, but also gives you a 50% weakness to magicka. While it gives you more magicka than the Mage, I wouldn't choose this since the weakness magicka sucks. If you're a Breton and already have 50% magic resistance, you can nullify the penalty of this sign, in which case it technically doesn't make you weak. So as a Breton, you may be tempted to choose this for the extra magicka, though you may value the magic resistance more. The Atronach increases your max magicka by 200%, also gives you a 50% chance to absorb spells, but it has a huge downside. Your magicka is stunted, meaning that you do not regenerate magicka at all, even if you sleep. So the only way to restore your magicka is with potions, or if you get lucky, you can absorb an enemy's spell and thus absorb its magicka cost. I never use this birth sign despite its huge bonus to your magicka pool because I hate lugging around a million potions. I know some veteran Morrowind players love to use this because you have a chance to absorb spells and it's a lot of magicka, but this feels terrible for someone who isn't a min-maxer. The ritual gives you a power you can use once per day called Mara's Gift, which restores 100 points of your health immediately. It also gives you access to 2 spells, Blessed Word, which turns undead for 30 seconds at range, and Blessed Touch, which turns undead for 30 seconds on touch. I've never used turn undead spells myself, but the reason you'd use them is that it makes the undead run away from you, and during that time you can heal yourself, run away, or even kill the enemy while it's running away. This is a situationally good birth sign only if you make use of these turn undead spells. Otherwise, the 100-point heal is nice to have, but it's just an emergency button to use once per day. The Lover increases your agility by 25 points and also gives you a power you can use once per day called Lover's Kiss. It paralyzes the target for 60 seconds, but it also damages your own fatigue by 200, so it's not great if your character relies on weapon attacks to do damage. Some enemies can be immune to paralysis, and some enemies could reflect the effect back on you, which would be horrible because then you'd be paralyzed for a full minute, likely leading to your death. However, the 25-point bonus to agility is super nice for a character that mainly uses weapons to attack, since it will increase your chance to hit and your fatigue. So even if you ignore the Lover's Kiss power or only use it in emergencies, the agility bonus makes this sign worth choosing. The Shadow grants you a power you can use once per day that casts invisibility on yourself for 60 seconds. Invisibility isn't nearly as good as you think it is though, because it immediately becomes dispelled if you attack, open a door, open a container, pick up an item, or generally interact with anything. So this is pretty much useless. Last but not least, the Tower gives you a once per day power that allows you to open a door or container with a lock of 50 or below. It also grants you a spell called Beggar's Nose, which detects animals, enchantments, and keys for 60 seconds. The main reason you'd pick this sign is for the Tower Key power, so that you can unlock something of 50 difficulty or below. This is more useful earlier on in the game, but not so much later if you have a good security skill or if you're using open spells from the Alteration School. The spell I don't think is useful other than perhaps detecting some keys, but for the lock opening power, this is a solid choice. All in all, most of these signs are fine. The only really bad one is the Atronach because of the lack of magicka regeneration, and the Shadow because it's useless. Everything else is not as bad even if it has a downside, though I would also stay away from the Apprentice unless you're a Breton. This has been my beginner's guide to character creation in Morrowind. I tried to keep it as short and simple as I could, but still provide enough details to help newcomers understand the more important bits. If you enjoyed this, I hope you stay for the future videos I plan to make about games I care about. Feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, or maybe even become a channel member. Everything helps. This has been B Tier Mutineer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.